What if everything you think you know about ancient history is a lie? Not just a mistake or a few missing pieces of the puzzle, but a deliberate cover-up. A conspiracy stretching back thousands of years to bury a truth so world-shattering it would change, well, everything. We've been fed a simple story about our past, a slow, steady climb from caves to cities. But there are whispers, etched in stone and buried in sand, that tell a very different story. They speak of impossible knowledge, of technology that shouldn't exist, and of entire chapters of our story that have been ripped out of the history books. Today, we're tearing back that curtain. We're diving into the shadows to look at the evidence that's been ignored, laughed off, or just maybe intentionally hidden. We're recounting down the 10 most shocking secrets that ancient powers tried to bury forever. Secrets that make you question the very foundation of reality. From the ashes of forgotten libraries to the silent, empty spaces inside the Great Pyramid, a different version of history is fighting to be told. It's time to question everything. The pharaoh who got deleted. Akhenaten's revolution. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a wild story of revolution, betrayal, and a conspiracy to literally delete a king from time itself. In ancient Egypt, you had hundreds of gods for everything. But around 1350 BC, a pharaoh named Amenhotep IV took the throne and did the unthinkable. He declared that all those gods were fakes. He said there was only one true god, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. This wasn't just a religious change, it was an earthquake that shook the entire empire. The pharaoh changed his own name to Akhenaten, he who serves the Aten. He ditched the traditional capital of Thebes and built a massive, glorious new city out in the desert called Amarna, all for his one god. For almost 20 years, Akhenaten and his famous queen, Nefertiti, ruled from this city. They created a bizarre new art style, a new culture, and what many believe is the very first attempt at monotheism in history. But this revolution wasn't built to last. The second Akhenaten died, the old priests and nobles he'd pushed aside got their revenge. They didn't just walk away from his city and his god. They launched one of the most thorough campaigns of destruction you can imagine. Akhenaten's own son, the boy king Tutankhamun, was forced to bring back the old gods and abandon Amarna, leaving it to be swallowed by the desert. But the cover-up went so much further. Akhenaten's name was hacked off of monuments and king lists. His statues were smashed to pieces, his temples torn down, block by block. To the Egyptians, erasing your name meant destroying your soul for all eternity. For over 3,000 years, it almost worked. He became a ghost, the heretic king, his revolutionary story only pieced back together by modern archaeologists. The takedown was so complete, it begs a chilling question. If they could almost delete a pharaoh who ruled for 2 decades, who or what else have they successfully erased forever? The ashes of an empire, the Roman hit on Carthage. At number 9, we have a cover-up born from the pure, brutal finality of war. This is the story of Carthage, a powerhouse of an empire that was brave enough or foolish enough to take on ancient Rome. For more than 100 years, these two giants fought over control of the Mediterranean in what we call the Punic Wars. Carthage, in modern-day Tunisia, was a hub of trade, technology, and sea power. Its people were brilliant, with a culture and a history that could stand up to any in the world. The final bloody chapter, the Third Punic War, ended in 146 BC. Roman history, which is the only version we have, tells us it was total annihilation. The story goes that after a 3-year siege, the Romans flooded the city, butchered or enslaved everyone inside, and then leveled it to the ground. There's a famous legend that says they even sowed the fields with salt to make sure nothing would ever grow there again. While that part is probably just Roman propaganda, it tells you everything you need to know about their intentions. For centuries, this was the accepted story. It was a terrifying warning from Rome to anyone else thinking of stepping out of line. But was it the whole truth? Here's the problem. We have almost no history from the Carthaginian side. The victors wrote the history, and in doing so, they created a black hole. The libraries of Carthage, their records, their stories, all of it went up in flames. Modern archaeology, however, is starting to poke holes in this story of total destruction. Digs have shown that while the city was devastated, life did go on. In fact, Rome eventually built a new Roman city right on top of the ruins, and it became a crucial part of their empire. So the real cover-up wasn't just physical, it was cultural. By erasing Carthage's voice, Rome got to define its enemy forever, painting them as savages who got what they deserved. The real cover-up of Carthage wasn't just burning a city, it was silencing an entire civilization, leaving us to find their truth in the ashes. The bonfire of 100 schools, Qin Shi Huang's Great Erasure. Our 8th entry takes us to ancient China, and to an emperor whose ego was so huge, he tried to unify not just the country but thought itself. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, is famous for the terracotta army and starting the Great Wall. But he's also infamous for an act of cultural destruction so total, it's terrifying. The burning of books and the burying of scholars. Around 213 BC, after conquering all his rivals, Qin Shi Huang faced a new threat: ideas. China had a vibrant intellectual scene known as the 100 Schools of Thought. Philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism offered different ways to run a society, and scholars would often use history to criticize the emperor's brutal new regime. For an absolute ruler like Qin Shi Huang, all these different ideas weren't a strength, they were a danger. His solution was horrifyingly simple. He ordered that all historical records from the old states be destroyed. Every work of philosophy, poetry, and history that didn't fit with his official government view was to be handed over and burned. If you were caught with a forbidden book, you could be sentenced to forced labor or even executed. The only things spared were practical manuals on farming, medicine, and fortune-telling. This was a calculated attempt to unplug the present from the past, to make sure no one could even imagine a different way of life. But he didn't stop with books. The ancient historian Sima Qian wrote that a year later, the emperor took things a step further. The story goes that he had around 460 scholars executed for daring to defy him, possibly by burying them alive. Now, historians today debate the exact number and the gruesome details, but no one doubts the main point. This was a brutal crackdown on free thought. This was an attempt to control reality itself. By erasing the past, Qin Shi Huang wanted to make sure his dynasty was the beginning and end of all knowledge. Lucky for history, his dynasty collapsed pretty quickly after he died, but the damage was done. Countless texts were lost forever. It's a chilling lesson in how the most dangerous weapon isn't a sword, but control over what a civilization is allowed to think. The Lost Gospels and Forbidden Knowledge, the Dead Sea Scrolls, suppression. At number 7, we have a mystery that has it all: ancient religion, modern archaeology, and explosive accusations of a cover-up. In the late 1940s, a shepherd stumbled into a cave near the Dead Sea and found clay jars stuffed with ancient scrolls. It turned out to be the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. The Dead Sea Scrolls are our oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible, along with a treasure trove of unknown texts from a mysterious Jewish sect that lived there 2,000 years ago. This was a bombshell. The scrolls were a snapshot of religion right at the time of Jesus and the birth of Christianity. But as a small, exclusive team of scholars began the slow work of putting the fragments together, decades started to pass. The vast majority of the texts were kept under lock and key, hidden from the world. This intense secrecy fueled a firestorm of conspiracy theories. Why the delay? What was in those scrolls that was so dangerous? The theories ran wild. Maybe they told a different story about Jesus. Maybe they proved the early church had twisted key beliefs. Was the Vatican secretly pulling the strings, suppressing the scrolls to protect the official story? The idea of a small committee guarding this revolutionary knowledge for so long felt, to a lot of people, like a cover-up in slow motion. When the full texts were finally released to the public in the 1990s, the wildest conspiracies were toned down. There was no secret scroll about Jesus having a wife. But the scrolls did reveal a Jewish world that was far more diverse and complicated than anyone knew. Many ideas we thought were uniquely Christian were actually floating around in Jewish communities long before. Even today, new technology is revealing more secrets from the scrolls. And it reminds us how controlling information, even if you don't mean to, breeds suspicion. It leaves us all wondering if every secret from those desert caves has truly seen the light of day. Before we get to our next entry, which involves a piece of technology that just shouldn't exist, we've got a question for you. Which historical mystery do you think is hiding the biggest secret? Let us know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this trip into history's forbidden zones, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have a lot more secrets to dig up together, and you don't want to miss what's next. The Baghdad Battery. A spark of suppressed science? Our sixth ancient cover-up throws a wrench in the entire timeline of technology. We're taught that electricity is a modern invention, figured out by guys like Alessandro Volta in the 18th century. But what if a little clay pot found near Baghdad proves that history is off by about 2,000 years? Meet the Baghdad Battery. Found in 1938, this thing, dating back to around 250 BC, is pretty simple. It's a terracotta jar about 5 inches tall. Inside, there's a copper cylinder, and hanging in the middle of that is an iron rod, held in place by an asphalt seal. Now, to anyone who took a high school science class, that looks exactly like a primitive battery. All you'd need to do is pour in something acidic, like vinegar or grape juice, and the chemical reaction between the copper and iron would generate a small electric current. The discovery was, and still is, wildly controversial. Mainstream archaeology has mostly dismissed it. They argue there's no other evidence, no wires, no diagrams, no mention of electricity anywhere to prove the Parthians knew what they had. The common explanation is that they were just jars for storing sacred scrolls, and the fact that they look like batteries is a complete coincidence. But for a lot of people, that explanation just doesn't feel right. Why this specific, complicated setup? Why use copper and iron, the perfect metals for the job? The alternative theories are way more exciting. Some think these batteries were used for electroplating, using a small current to put a thin layer of gold or silver on cheaper metals. Others imagine a more religious use, maybe to give a statue a little shock, creating a magical or divine experience for worshippers. The cover-up here isn't from some ancient king, but from modern thinking. The theory is that mainstream science, so invested in the idea that we slowly and steadily got smarter, just can't handle an artifact like this. It's easier to label it a fluke, an out-of-place artifact, and shove it to the side so it doesn't mess up their tidy timeline. But people have made replicas, and they work. The Baghdad Battery is a stubborn anomaly, a tiny spark that suggests our ancestors might have been playing with forces we never thought they understood. The Vatican's secret archives, 53 miles of hidden history. We've now arrived at number 5, and an institution that's practically synonymous with secrets, the Vatican. Deep inside Vatican City sits one of the most mysterious and misunderstood collections of documents on Earth. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, better known by its old name, the Vatican's Secret Archives. Now, the Vatican is quick to point out that the Latin word secretum really just means private. But let's be honest, With 53 miles of shelves holding 12 centuries of secrets, that explanation hasn't done much to kill the mystery. This isn't some small library. The archives hold an unbelievable 53 miles of shelving, packed with documents covering more than 1,000 years of human history. There are personal letters from popes, records of church councils, state secrets, and papers that map the entire course of Western civilization. We know they have letters from Michelangelo, King Henry VIII's desperate plea for an annulment that sparked the English Reformation, and the full records from the trial of Galileo. For most of history, these archives were completely sealed off. It wasn't until 1881 that they were opened to a few hand-picked scholars, and even today, getting access is notoriously difficult. This history of secrecy has, of course, fueled a universe of conspiracy theories. What is the Vatican hiding on those 53 miles of shelves? Are there lost gospels that tell a different story of Jesus? Proof of the Church's role in dark historical events? Or something even wilder, esoteric knowledge, or even records of contact with something not of this world? The Vatican has tried to be more transparent lately, even opening up the controversial records of Pope Pius V, who led the Church during World War II. But huge sections are still off limits, and the sheer amount of material is impossible for anyone to get through. The fact that a critical document about the Knights Templar was lost in the archives for 700 years, only to be found by accident in 2001, tells you everything you need to know. The Vatican's archive is the ultimate historical mystery box. It's a place where you can tell the difference between careful preservation and a deliberate cover-up of truths that could shake the world. We can only guess what secrets are still sitting on those shelves, waiting for someone to find them. The burnt scrolls of Alexandria, the greatest loss of knowledge in history. Coming in at number 4 is maybe the most legendary and tragic cover-up of them all. This wasn't about hiding one secret, but about erasing an entire world of knowledge. We're talking about the Great Library of Alexandria, the intellectual heart of the ancient world. Founded in Egypt in the 3rd century BC, the library had a mind-blowing goal: to collect all of the world's knowledge. Agents were sent all over to buy scrolls. Any ship that docked in Alexandria had to hand over its books to be copied. At its height, the library was said to hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls on philosophy, science, math, and history from every corner of the known world. This is where a genius named Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with shocking accuracy. It was the epicenter of human knowledge. The story of its destruction is famous, but it's a messy one. The truth is, there was no one single event. The library died a slow, agonizing death over centuries, a death by 1,000 cuts. It was damaged in part by Julius Caesar's fire in 48 BC. It was starved of funding by disinterested rulers. And its final death blow likely came from Christian mobs in the 4th century who wanted to stamp out all pagan knowledge. The cover-up here is devastatingly simple: the loss. How many scientific breakthroughs, plays, poems, and histories just vanished? Did the ancients know things that it took us another 1,000 years to rediscover? The destruction, especially by religious fanatics, was a deliberate suppression of any knowledge that was considered dangerous or went against the faith. But there's another layer to the cover-up. The conflicting stories and the lack of clear archaeological evidence for the main library have created a vacuum filled with speculation. The loss of the Library of Alexandria is the ultimate historical black hole, created by politics, neglect, and fanaticism. It's a permanent, painful reminder of the knowledge we once had and let burn, leaving us to forever wonder what secrets were lost in the flames. The Maya Codices, a cultural autopsy by fire. At number 3, we head to the jungles of Mesoamerica for a cover-up that was as fast as it was total. The Maya civilization was, in many ways, the most advanced in the Americas before Columbus. They were master astronomers and brilliant mathematicians who came up with the concept of zero all on their own. And they had the most sophisticated writing system around, which they used to write beautiful, complex books called codices. These books held centuries of Maya wisdom. They were filled with detailed charts tracking the planets, complex calendars, prophecies, histories of their kings, and the secrets of their religious ceremonies. We can only imagine what was in the thousands of books that existed, a complete library of a civilization's soul. Then, in the 16th century, the Spanish conquistadors showed up. After the military conquest came the spiritual one. Catholic priests saw the native beliefs as demonic and decided to wipe them out completely. The most notorious act came in 1562 from a bishop named Diego de Landa. In a single, horrifying event, he ordered his men to gather up all the Maya codices they could find and burn them. De Landa himself wrote about it without a trace of remorse, saying, "We found a large number of books, and as they contained nothing but superstition and lies of the devil, we burned them all." He even noted that the Maya were devastated by the loss. You think this was a deliberate act of cultural genocide? It was an attempt to erase a people's memory, to wipe their entire history off the map and replace it with a new European one. The cover-up was horrifyingly effective. Of the thousands of books that once existed, only 4 are known to have survived. 4. These precious few books, which thankfully ended up in Europe, are our only direct link to the incredible scientific and literary world of the ancient Maya. For centuries, even these 4 books were a mystery, because the knowledge of how to read the language was lost. Only in the last 50 years or so did we finally crack the code. Today, these codices are helping us piece together what was lost, but they are also a monument to one of the most brutal and effective cover-ups in history, a bonfire that consumed a universe. The void in the pyramid, the hidden chambers of Giza. For our second-to-last entry, we're back in Egypt at its most famous monument. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for 4,500 years, and it's still an engineering marvel we can't fully explain. For centuries, we thought we had it all mapped out. The King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery. We thought the tour was complete. But what if the pyramid was hiding a secret on a massive scale? In 2017, science gave us a shock. A project called Scan Pyramids used cosmic ray technology to peer inside the pyramid like me.